This is Listen Lakeland, the show that keeps you up to date on all things happening in and around the Lakeland area. Here's your chance to plan your family activities and learn more about what your city government and your neighbors are doing to make Lakeland a great place to live, work, and play.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Listen Lakeland. My name's Ileana Kines, and I am here today with Linda Parker, Director of Victim Services for Peace River Center. So welcome, Linda.
Thanks so much. I'm so glad that I could be here today to talk about victim services and just give a little bit of an overview of what Peace River Center has to offer as well.
Yeah, so Linda, why don't you go ahead and start off by telling us a brief overview of Peace River Center and how victim services plays a role in that.
So Peace River Center is a community-based mental health organization, but it has many arms and branches into several different places in the community. And so one of the things that most people know Peace River Center for is, of course, for mental health. We do have 2 crisis response units and a crisis and then some longer term mental health assistance. Additionally, we have substance abuse help. And we also work with Clubhouse, which is a national organization, to work with those in the community who just need a little bit of extra assistance, and also to allow them to come in and do things like work in the community.
You talked a little bit about extra resources for individuals living with a mental illness through Club Success. That, I believe that's located in Lakeland, correct?
That is correct. And they just recently they're going to be moving locations. And so it's super important to let the community know that they will be moving over by the Tiger Stadium. And so and I think it's directly across. So we'll be making that transition in the next few months. So look for some activity over there. That's actually going to be a really great spot because the community members can engage in that area. And it's just a really nice area. So we're really excited to be able to move there.
Great. And so you being our Director of Victim Services, so how does Victim Services play into Peace River Center and the umbrella of helping our community?
So we're really lucky that we have such a large community partnership, and victim services is just, like I mentioned, one of the many arms that Peace River Center has. We actually are also in the 3-county area, and we are what's considered a dual center. So we deal with both domestic violence and sexual violence. Probably a lesser known thing is that we do also work with human trafficking victims. So one of the things that we have really started to work is really bring attention to that in the 3-county area that we live in, and getting some help for those that are being trafficked. So in terms of the domestic violence side of the house, we have 2 domestic violence shelters. One of those is located in Polk County and one is located in Highlands County. Collectively, they hold around 55, 60 folks between the 2 shelters. And we're very blessed in that both shelters are set up really well. They are a confidential location because we don't want folks to know where the domestic violence shelters are at for the safety of those who choose to come into that service. But aside from the domestic violence shelters, we also have an extensive outreach network. We have an outreach office in every county that we are in. And in that office is always a sexual violence advocate and a domestic violence advocate. So we try to make sure that both things are covered. We have 3 hotlines. So 1 for the sexual violence and 2 for the domestic violence side, just mainly broken out by county. It just makes things a little bit easier. So to get into our services, it's just a simple, really phone call. And if you call the hotline at any given time, you'll get to an advocate. And our purpose really as advocates is to really meet the client where they're at. Not everyone comes into the same frame of mind. And so we really try to engage them in the in the place that they're at when they come to us. Sometimes that means that they come with just the things on their back, and sometimes they have much more things coming with them. Sometimes they can bring kids, sometimes they can't. So we just really try to meet everybody and then move them from there to where they need to be.
So you can accept women or men and their dependents?
Yes, we do not have any, we accept men, women, everyone from the LGBTQ community. We are an all-inclusive shelter. We have specific accommodations we can make so that we can keep everyone safe. And we do not discriminate against kids. And even if, and a lot of times we might have a situation where an older parent is taking care of an adult child that is special needs population, and that works as well. Really, our main concern is how do we get you safe, and how do we make sure that you stay safe?
Right. So can you tell me then how an individual wanting to, I guess, do you say escape or leave a harmful situation, a domestic violence situation, get into the shelter, whether it's in Polk or in Highlands?
So the first step that anyone would take if they wanted to come into either shelter or to outreach would be to call the hotline. And the hotline for Polk is the 863-413-2700 number, and 863-386-1167 for Hardy Highlands. And what they'll get when they get on that phone call is they'll talk to an advocate, and they'll kind of go through a series of questions. How long has the domestic violence been going on? Kind of talk to me a little bit about what that looks like. Folks do not have to give us their real name. They don't have to give us any personal information that connects us back to them at all. If they want to come into shelter, we do talk to them about things like community living and how the shelter is structured. We work off of an empowerment-based model. So we really focus on the person holistically and really getting them where they want to go personally, as opposed to a more structured program. So that's always important for folks to know coming in. It's also different being in a community-based setting. Even if even if you've been in a domestic violence situation, you're often high stressed out, and then you're coming into a situation where you have no idea whether there's going to be 10 people or 30 people. So we try to be very upfront with folks. If they are accepted in a shelter and it is something that they want to do, the only way to get to the shelter is through the police department. So that might be the Polk County Sheriff's Office or the Sebring PD. Every police officer and every county officer that we work with will bring you to the domestic violence shelter.
So in that case, would you do safety planning with the individual in order that when they do get picked up, they would be safe from harm?
Absolutely. Safety planning is kind of the staple of working with domestic violence victims. And I'm glad you brought that up because we do it a lot. We safety plan when they leave their home. The scariest time is the time when it's time to leave, when you've decided, when the survivor has decided they're ready to go, is probably the most stressful time. So we talk about things like, what do you need to bring with you? What can you even get access to? Maybe it's more important that you get out of the house than it is whether or not you take anything with you, and we'll deal with that later. So those are the types of things we look at when we're on the phone with them. How do we manage to get you out safely without anyone getting injured and get you here to us? And so everybody's safety plan is very different. And it's really dependent upon the person and where they're coming from and what that looks like.
So you bring up safety. So talk about once they're in the shelter, you've talked about, obviously it's a confidential location at both places, which that seems very appropriate. How do you manage the in and out of, like obviously they're still living a life. They are very independent. So how do you support that and also keep them safe in knowing that the abusers may know where they're coming and going to?
Yeah, it is one of the things that we really worry about, as you can imagine, is batters finding where folks are at. So we've been very blessed in that when we sit down with a survivor, we talk to them about all of the places they might possibly go or connections to things that they might possibly run into where their batterer might be. We try to look at every situation. When they're leaving the shelter, we safety plan with them when they leave, and we safety plan with them when they come in. And that's because we don't know where they've been while they've been outside the shelter. So what kind of things might have you experienced when you were out? It's more like a debrief to allow them some time to really discuss the things that they're feeling about being out in the world and worrying about being safe. We have a lot of survivors that ride the bus, and that's always a safety issue. So we talk about, what do you do if you get on the bus and your abuser's on the bus? What do you do? What if, and with kids, it's complicated because, the kids often may not understand what's going on. And so they may want to see the other parents. So we talked about safety with children. It's a very different level when you have kiddos and you have to get on a bus. So we talk about that, and safety with your car. So we plan for every step that they have to go. When they tell us they're leaving the shelter and they want to tell us where they're going, we safety plan with them for every step along the way.
I know that I keep hyper focusing on the safety, but obviously that's probably a concern for so many individuals. So in that case, do you work with the court process if somebody's wanting to file an injunction or some sort of case against their abuser? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we have an ability to get an injunction filed 24 hours a day. So if the participants brought in and they want to file an emergency injunction, we can call the clerk's office and get that filed overnight. We also will escort clients. Now, COVID has kind of turned our world upside down, obviously. So, the ability to go to court with survivors is not possible right now just because the court system is not allowing folks in. And in fact, they're not doing most emergency injunctions in person. They're doing them via phone. So, but we can still accompany them phonetically and make sure that they get assistance. The thing about safety planning and the situation we're in right now with COVID is many of the safety plans we're doing with survivors right now are how do you stay safe in your domestic violence environment in your home. And unfortunately, and I've said this to quite a few folks, what we would normally suggest to folks leaving is to leave, right? Well, in the time of COVID, where do you go? Nothing's open. So, you can't go you can go to the store, but it's not the same. The escape routes that we had previously used with survivors are not the same anymore. And so many of the advocates have been talking to clients about, okay, so you're staying, you're not able to go. How do we keep you safe? And at what point do we have to then make other decisions and where you're not going to be able to stay? At what point is that something we need to address? So that's a whole different type of stress, is having to exist in an environment where it's very toxic, but you can't leave for safety reasons.
Okay. So you talked about your hotline. So it sounds like your hotlines are the entryway into the shelter and additional services. So can you talk a little bit about what you've seen as far as an increase in these calls that you're talking about, maybe the safety planning? What are some of the concerns and safety issues that they have?
So we've seen on the domestic violence side about 130% increase in domestic violence calls spread out over the COVID time, and just looking at numbers over the last couple of years. And so we know that the people are afraid, but they don't want to come into shelter. So as I mentioned, we're really looking at things like, how do we get you into a family member's home that might be able to help take care of you? Health is a huge concern for a lot of our survivors. I'm not well, so I can't go to here. I can't be exposed. I can't worry about that piece. Or I have small children that I have to worry about not being exposed. So those are the things that we talk about, what is the out, right? What do we do? And then in the meantime, these are the steps that you need to take in your house. So when you can leave, you can leave. So things like packing what we call a hurricane bag, or a bag where you pack all of your important papers and you pack things on top of it and you get it ready to go. right? So you talk about those types of things with survivors and you explain to them to prepare. And sometimes in that preparation, that gets you into a place where you feel comfortable leaving.
Okay, very good. What can other victims do during these times to protect themselves and their children? I know you talked a little bit about that in normal times, not necessarily COVID times, you give them some resources or places to go to maybe get away for the time being. So what are kind of some of the suggestions that you're using now?
I mean, some of the things that we're telling people now is when an argument breaks out in your home and you can remove yourself from the situation, there's a place you can go. And, we talk a lot about behaviors of the batter and how do you adjust to that. Unfortunately, for domestic violence victims, you get pretty savvy at recognizing when it's about to blow up and what you have to do. So part of what we talk about is how do you not create a blow up? And that's not, obviously not victim blaming or any of those types of things, but you're trying to keep the household as safe as you possibly can be. Maybe the situation is that no one's working, right? Or you're both working from home. Is there something else we can do to remove the two of you into different areas? Maybe it's having the kids at home. I can tell you that a lot of the phone calls we've gotten, having children at home and having nowhere to go and not working outside the home is creating an abysmal amount of stress with folks. So we talk about, take the child and go for a walk. Give yourself space and time so that you can get a breather, so that you can deal with the things going on and you're keeping the baby safe. We absolutely tell people, do not wait until it turns into a violent situation to flee. It's never worth staying for that. We have a place for you to come. We're here if you need us. And I think that's the most important thing. Calling the police if you need to. We really work very closely with our police partners. And, we've talked to some of the Polk County Sheriff folks and some of the Lakeland folks, and they're seeing a huge increase in calls also. That's part of what we're trying to avoid right now is we're already seeing an increase in deaths in Florida related to domestic violence. So we really need to figure out what it is we can do to stop that, because we're going to be living with COVID for a while, and we need to be able to work it out. And while we're maintaining the CDC's recommendation for social distancing and masks, we are keeping the shelters as clean and well running as normal. And we have not had any situations where we've had to worry about COVID so far, knock on wood. But, I think a lot of that is hats off to the employees, because they do a great job of making sure that they communicate very effectively with the survivors, that they're communicating very well with each other and with me. And so I don't really foresee us having any issues like that, but we are taking very, very big precautions. And if something should happen, we do have a protocol where we have space to put someone who would be quarantined away from the rest of the group. So we are prepared even if someone is ill, because like I said, I worry about your safety. We can deal with the medical stuff, if we have to, but ultimately I need you safe. And so that's what we need to worry about first.
Sure. So one of the questions that we hadn't talked about previously, but I was thinking about, I'm assuming that a lot of our victims, which we say victims, we turn them into survivors. And so they come in and they typically have limited, clothes or household items and all of their belongings, right? They can't always leave with everything that they have. How does Peace River Center and Victim Services support them in finding what they need, or do we give them those items that they need to live with?
So there's a couple of different ways that we do this. So if a client is in the shelter, we provide all of their general needs, and that's through a variety of ways. We get funding from the state, but we also get a great deal of support from the communities that we live and work in. I cannot say enough positive things about how well we get supported. How many donations, just community members dropping off clothes and things for household goods. We talk a lot about their clothing, but we also then help them get into a house. So they come with no household stuff, no furniture, no pots and pans. So it's essentially like beginning your life over. And so, we have a thrift store. Peace River Center has a thrift store, and we do take in donations from there. And folks that are our clients can go there and get staples. So clothing, household products, anything that they could get in a thrift store. Additionally, in the shelter, we also provide clothing, diapers, formula, food, everything that you would normally have in your own home, sheets, towels, we provide in the shelter. We also do some of that in outreach. So we do provide, folks can come in and participate in groups or come in through a variety of ways and get assistance with things like diapers or food. We obviously don't have unlimited funds, but we try to help everyone out as much as we can. And we certainly try to replace at least the minimum things that you can have inside the shelter to make life a little more livable while you're living in a community living situation. And so you don't have to worry about how you're going to feed yourself or, take care of your basic needs.
Sure. So also with that, with your self-sufficiency programming, you're also assisting individuals in getting into a job, making sure that they are self-sufficient before they leave the program. And on top of that, what is the length of time for a typical shelter length of stay?
So we are traditionally a emergency shelter. So average stay is 6 to 8 weeks. Now, during the COVID time, we actually extended this. So we're looking at about a 16-week stay is about what the average is right now, just because it's hard to get folks into housing right now, with the COVID situation and making sure we have everything we need. And we will never create a homeless situation. So if they come in and they don't have a place to go, they're not going to leave without a place to go, regardless of where that place. It might be different for every person, right? So we will make sure that they get all of their housing set up. We work on jobs. We work on schooling. I'm a very big proponent of education. And so we have a program we work with that's an external group called WISP. And they will, through us, give scholarships to the survivors to go back to college. And it's a pretty substantial scholarship. And they will continue to get that scholarship dollars through their entire college education, as long as they maintain a 2.5 GPA and they are self-sufficient. So it's programs like that that allow us to be able to get people not just back to where you were before, but sometimes even into a better situation and something that you can work on for yourself. We're very much about your empowering yourself. So we really want someone to be stable when they leave. And so we do all of those things. We'll work with Career Source Polk to try to find jobs. We work with HUD to find housing. And, I'm just very grateful that we have all the kind of the structure we have for the survivors so that they can get the assistance they need from all these different groups with us.
So what would you say to a family member who may call and say, I'm concerned about a loved one? I know, a lot of people will call and say, I don't know what to do. Like, what do you say? We get that a lot, right? You know somebody that's experiencing this. How do I get them the help that they need?
We really encourage, it's kind of a tricky situation with domestic violence because family members really sometimes see it before the survivor or victim may see it. They may have seen things that made them uncomfortable, 6 months, a year in advance of that actually happening. And, one of the things I tell people that is the most important is to be the support. The worst thing that we deal with as advocates is when we ask someone who their support system is, and they say that everyone has deserted them because it took too long for them to decide to leave. It is the worst thing to have. We can do all kinds of things for survivors, but I can't be your mom. And I can't be your sister or your best friend because you need someone that can help you through those times. So one of the things I tell everyone is, if you do nothing else, don't desert them. even when you're frustrated, even when you're angry at their choices. This is a very long process, and it takes people about 9 times to leave before they finally leave. So that's a long time. That's 9 times of going and coming. That's 9 times of frustration. And a lot of family members get tired because they think that you should just fix it. And it's just not that simple. There's lots of dynamics that go into domestic and sexual violence. So what I would tell folks to do is really try to give them as many resources and give us our information. The other thing you can do is if you need help, even if you're not the victim, but you're supporting someone who's a victim, please call the hotline. The advocates there are used to doing more than just talking to victims. We talk to secondary victims, which is what we call family members, all the time. We talk them through the stress of, seeing things happen, and we can be that support for you too. So, and you're going to need support to support them. So I would really encourage you to call and encourage them to call and encourage them to call the police. And if you see the situation getting out of control, you call the police. Don't wait, especially if there's kiddos involved.
Absolutely. So, as far as resources are concerned, are there any other shelter resources for domestic violence? Is there anything else? If you can't help an individual through the services that you provide, where do you tell them to go?
I can honestly say that there are very few times that I can't find a resource in the counties we live in through someone. We have a great community network. So, we have a network group of us that meets monthly to talk about everything in every community, everything that you could possibly happen. I know that I can send an email to those folks at any point and get assistance. We do, we have a lot of connections. We use, obviously Peace River Center, mental health for mental health, and the substance abuse for substance abuse. So we have those types of resources. When it comes to housing, we have multiple agreements with multiple apartment complexes around the counties. So, other than resources as it relates to, we always can use, donations into the shelter and those types of things, but outward facing to the community, we have a pretty good network.
So you touched a little bit about donations. So what's your greatest need with victim service? I know you talked about a little bit of the funding coming from DCF and all that stuff, but where is your greatest need?
I would say the hygiene products and things that can keep the survivors having a little bit of fun in the shelter. But overall, for our operational needs, it's a lot of hygiene products, towels, sheets, things like that we go through pretty quickly. And as you can imagine, when people come in and out, and for every person that comes in the shelter, they get a bag, and it's got, shampoo, conditioner, brand new toothbrushes, toothpaste, the basic things that you would need. But if they stay a couple weeks, that's a replenishment factor. If there's lots of kids, kids products is something that we need a lot of. Also, a lot of kids bath products, because those are all the things that we run out of very quickly.
So if someone wanted to make a donation to Peace River Center Victim Services, how would they do that?
So right now we're encouraging everyone to call our office because we're scheduling those kind of pickups right now so that because of COVID, so we've got staff working from home and it's kind of crazy, but we are accepting donations at our victim services office. So you might want to go out to the website also and take a look at what is needed. And then you can also see our address and give us a call. And our website is peacerivercenter.org.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest here today on Listen Lakeland. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And if you want to go ahead and mention your hotline numbers again, so that if anyone needs to reach out for help, they can have that information.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me. So the sexual assault crisis line is actually 863-413-2707. The Polk County hotline for domestic violence is 863-413-2707. 2700. And the hotline for Hardy Highlands is 863-386-1167. So I'm glad you asked me again. So thanks so much for having me.
Listen Lakeland is brought to you as a collaborative project between Lakeland Vision, the City of Lakeland, and Hall Communications. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.